Hey guys, welcome back. We are bringing you a January special today and looking at how nutrition trends are louder than ever in January, but are they actually helping you as an athlete perform? Renee McGregor is back on the podcast with us, and we're cutting straight through the noise. As one of the world's most experienced sport dietitians and leading specialist in athlete nutrition, Renee has spent decades working with athletes at every single level. And she's here to debunk the myths, call out the ridiculous trends, and challenge the advice that's doing more harm than good as we kick off the new year, new me vibe. So let's get into it. Renee, thank you so much for coming back on and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, guys. It's so lovely to be back here with you too. I really enjoyed our conversation last time, and yeah, I'm excited to know what we're going to talk about this. I think last time we came up with so many like slogans that should have been on the t-shirts,
Yeah.
and I'm still like going back and listening to the podcast thinking, maybe I should make a t-shirt with that slogan on it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting to you too.
I know we could have spoken for hours, and I think we covered some really good topics. But I guess because of the time of this one in January, New Year, people are doing I want to set goals, I want to try and lose weight, I want to do this and that. So maybe we could start with kind of our thoughts around that and maybe putting that pressure on ourselves at the start of the year, if you want to kind of go with that in whichever direction you would like.
Yeah, I mean, I always think the 1st of January or even January is a really bad month to kind of decide to make a change. I know, like I get it. I get the kind of reasoning behind it because we've had this, I don't know, 2 to 4 weeks, depending on when you started your festive celebrations. But you've had a few weeks of I suppose no real routine, and maybe you've kind of been a little bit more relaxed about eating. Perhaps you haven't been able to make it to the gym as much. And I think people just kind of almost notice that sense of, I suppose, chaos is probably a good word to kind of to use. And I do use this word quite often because I think when people want to regain control of their
Mm.
lives, often when they're talking about control, what they're really talking about is trying to make the mess and the chaos that they're experiencing within them a bit more manageable, which I totally understand. Like I think, to a certain degree that makes sense. But I think that the problem is that we can become overly rigid and we can become overly fixated on what that is. And let's face it, January it's cold here in the UK, like really cold. We've got yet another storm at the moment. And it's also the time you go back to work. And there's it's like actually it's still dark. And I just think it's for me, it's not the time to suddenly become very, I suppose, it's just not the time I would start to become very fixated on achieving because I think you're almost setting yourself up to fail. And I think
Yeah.
there's a physiological fail in the sense of we have had this period of time where maybe you have eaten differently. And I think that's something that's really important to hold on to is that people often think, oh my God, I've eaten so much. But actually, have you eaten so much or have you just eaten differently? Because I know when I think about my own eating, yeah, it's different. I've probably chosen to eat more shortbread biscuits than I have apples. But overall, I probably haven't eaten that dissimilarly, in terms of if we're looking at overall sort of intake, energy intake, there's only so much energy I can consume to a certain degree. And so I haven't really changed things that much. It's just that the food choices are a little bit different because it's just that time of year where I'd much rather eat a shortbread than an apple, basically. But I think, and I think the other thing is that often for me, it's the time of year as well when I'm way more relaxed because I'm not working, which means I have a bit more time to go for slightly longer walks with the dogs or get out and, be out with friends for a bit longer in the hills, or maybe I will go for 2 walks in the day because I'm seeing friends and catching up. Like And so to a certain degree, I'm probably also doing a little bit more, even though I'm not kind of counting it or thinking about it. It's not like training, but I'm still being active. And I think people forget about all of this. I think people become so homed in on, oh my God, I've been doing it all differently. It's not been my routine. I haven't been going to the gym. And that's why they then like, okay, new year, new me, start again, start afresh, wipe the slate clean. And I just personally think it's the worst time of year to do it. Um, I'm not
I
sure
think
what you
people,
guys think about that.
yeah, yeah. I think people kind of like associate, I don't know, Christmas food or having Faye loves a bit of Christmas cake. I'm sure she won't mind me
Yeah,
saying. But like, yeah,
I love it.
instead of maybe having a biscuit, you eat a bit of Christmas cake, and then people kind of associate that with being a bad thing, or like I then have to like burn it off, or I need to do an extra long run because I want to have a mince pie and something. And I feel like, and yeah, sometimes it's done the wrong way. Instead of just enjoy it, like you say, you're probably moving more, you're probably going like on, I mean, so many people went for a run on Christmas Day that like I saw as well, because running's become so popular, and they're probably actually doing a lot more than they've done on previous Christmas holidays a few years ago anyway. Like,
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting what you said there, Em, about this whole fixation on earning your food,
mm,
right? Which is a real concern for me because it is what then causes people to fall into that trap of not being able to eat what their bodies are asking for or not being able to respond to hunger when it's there, and also not realizing that, we're actually, as humans, we're not this simple. I think over the years we've had this very simple formulation of calories in versus calories out, and to a certain degree, yes, the law of thermodynamics would suggest if we put more in um, than we use, then we'll gain weight, and if we do it the opposite round, we'll lose weight. Except it's not as simple as that because humans are not as simple as that, and I think that's where it becomes, this is where it does become quite problematic, and we're seeing this a little bit with this whole weight loss jab trend, with so many people being put or going on weight loss. I'm not going to say being put on weight loss just loss jabs, because I think people are choosing to
choosing.
be on them whether they need it or not. And I think that's really, really worrying. But we're seeing that, that actually the people that have even been put on them and have lost weight on them, actually what's happening is when they come off the medication, their weight is going back up. And there's two reasons for that. One is that maybe they haven't changed their lifestyle alongside it, because that's not necessarily being given in conjunction with the weight loss jabs. But the other thing is also is that genetically, our weight is very genetic, right? We are all born. I think I said this in our last conversation. We're all born with a blueprint, and our body has got this kind of general idea of where it wants to be. Now, of course, lifestyle does influence that 100%, but it's not as big an influence, I think, as people often assume. Like it's definitely influence. And I'm not saying that, if you choose to eat non-nutrient dense foods all day long, every day long for the rest of your life, of course that's going to have a negative consequence on you. But I think weight is more complicated. It's not something you can go, I want to be X, and then do that. I mean, I know a lot of people do, but they do it at a cost to themselves, right? They do it at a cost to their happiness sometimes. They do it that they become more isolated. They lose out. They don't find joy in life because they're having to be so restrictive and so controlled and so kind of contained in what they allow themselves to do or not do. And for me, that's not living. And I guess, we were chatting before we pressed go on this, and I've obviously just hit a bit of a milestone birthday. And I think for me, even more so than ever before, I'm like, life is so short, and it's become really, really kind of, it's really, really clear to me how short life is. And I don't want to spend any more time worrying about what size jeans I wear, or kind of And I think, and I get that some of that has come with being older, because I think as you do get older, you do let go of a lot more. And I definitely think there is something in that. And I'm sure, you know, those who are listening who are in their 30s or younger are probably going, yeah, yeah, whatever. And that's fine, because I probably would have been exactly the same. But as someone who has, been around for quite a while, as you get older, you do let go of more because you do realize what's more important. I think that's the key thing. You understand what is more important to value. And for me, it will always be spending time with those that make me feel good. But generally speaking, sharing foods, sharing a drink, sharing conversation, because that is then what feeds into my well-being. And I think it's often why we love Christmas, right? Because it's
Mm,
a time where we are, whether you're with family, whether you're with friends, whether, whatever you choose to do, the reason why so many of us enjoy Christmas is because we're not working. It's a time to switch off and it's a time to connect. And we don't get that often in our daily lives. And so I think it's important I find this time of year really useful time to reflect. And I think that's something that a lot of us should be doing, is reflecting on, okay, well, what is important and what matters most. Like if, and this sounds a bit morbid, but if this was your last day on this planet and you were looking back on your life, are you really going to be thinking about, you know, what you weighed or what you achieved? Or are you going to be thinking about what you've left behind in terms of, for me, it's always about making sure that my kids know that they've been loved. My husband knows that he's important to me. My friends know that they have, that they have not only built me up, but I've also helped support them. Like they're the things that I think about when I'm reflecting. So I think, yeah, it's a very, it worries me. This time of year really worries me because I think people become too restrictive. Like I understand if you want to kind of cut back a bit, perhaps if you have been a little bit heavy-handed with the quality street, then yeah, maybe we switch that up for a handful of nuts instead. But you don't have to necessarily just go that's it. I'm not eating anything. I'm just going to have my 3 meals, or I'm just going to, I think that's too restrictive and generally just tends to set you up to fail.
yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, there's so many things. I had so many questions going through. But I think firstly, I was gonna say I agree with you about January because like it's dark, it's grey, it's a long month. People are usually tight for cash. You're waiting
Mhm.
to get paid, you're going back to work, and then to add in some like restrictive habits that don't really help you, like can affect your mental health as well as physical health, and you probably will fail. And then when you fail, you feel even worse about yourself. So it's just like this endless like yeah circle that's just gonna keep coming back. But the one thing I wanted to ask you about was you say Christmas, and we talked a lot about Christmas and then leading into January. But I was thinking, like everyone probably, it's like socially acceptable to kind of let things go, eat these foods. Like everyone probably feels that they're not being judged around the festive period of like having an extra drink, maybe having a box of chocolates in their house. But at the same time, I was just wondering about the correlation between like maybe not being at work, not being judged, being a bit more fluid with what you're eating and movement, being around friends and family, so your mental health is pretty good. But that would reduce maybe stress, and then stress and the gut is very well connected. So maybe people are coming out of the festive season maybe potentially a little bit healthier because they're not as stressed. Then it doesn't affect their gut as much. They can digest food a bit better, maybe absorb more vitamins and minerals. I don't know whether I'm about going too far off, but I just, from a personal point of view, wondered if that was like correlated and how that would affect people going into January and then going restricting everything again and maybe, pulling themselves away from socialization and yeah, getting a bit depressed and how that would all run.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've made a really, really valid point. And I know, like I'm coming to the end of, I've had almost 3 weeks off, and I definitely feel better for it.
Mm.
Like I think one of the things that I personally noticed towards the end of the year was this real kind of pressure to carry lots of people's anxiety. Like the people I work with, you know, I love working with them, and obviously my whole job is to be able to help people have a better relationship with food and a better relationship with their bodies, and to be able to get back to the sports that they want to do. Like that's what my job is, and I love my job, but I always find coming towards the tail end of the year, there's a level of fatigue there. And also I think it's a fatigue on everybody's, from every side, in the sense of, but one of the things that I'm very acutely aware of, and I've been thinking about this quite a bit over these last few weeks, is, kind of thinking, I remember the first week of the holiday, and I just didn't feel better. I felt exhausted. And was just sort of talking to my husband, going, I'm knackered, like I'm properly shattered. And I don't really know why, because I am not doing anything extra. I'm not working. I'm not, we're not waking up at our usual early time to fit everything in before we start work. But I think when I was sort of stopping and thinking about it, I was realizing that a lot of my work does mean actually containing and holding people's anxiety. The things they can't experience for themselves to a certain degree, that's my job, is to hold them and help them and almost hold that until they're ready to do that. And that in itself feels very, very heavy, right? And it feels very exhausting. And I guess I think what you were saying, Faye, about I think probably a lot of people have just kind of limped over this kind of finish line of the end of the year, and we get a chance to restart. Because I think the thing about this particular holiday is that, like you said, there's no expectation from a work perspective. There's very little expectation for people to be in touch. You're not expected to answer an email. No one's really going to expect you to do that. You're not expected to be in the office, particularly depending on what you do. And I guess it's not all jobs, like obviously healthcare and various other jobs, it's different. But you get for the majority of us, it's an opportunity. And for the majority of us, it is a time where we go home, and maybe we go home and we are looked after, or in our case, our kids come to us and they're looked after, but there's still this kind of sense of, okay, we're all in this together, and it's a time for us to connect, and that connection is so important for our well-being. And I also think that while we've fixated a little bit more on kind of some of the foods that maybe aren't as nutrient dense for us, but actually there's a lot of good food around, in this festive season. I mean, all those kind of vegetables that you have with your Christmas dinner, nuts, that are often around, like they're really good for us. We've got lots of clementines. Like it doesn't all have to be bad, right? Like, and I think there's that absolutely you could come out probably a little bit healthier and actually a little bit kind of kinder to yourself, because you're not trying to live up to this general daily expectation, I guess, that you've placed on yourself, that, oh, I must go to the gym and I must eat like this and I must, work to this level and I must get this finished. Like we're not doing that, because we're all given permission, almost quite literally all given permission to go, it's okay, you can take a step back. And I mean, I wrote my Substack on this, actually. I wrote my Substack, my last Substack was very much, I wrote it between Christmas and New Year, and I was actually reflecting on this myself, that why do I wait all year round to give myself that permission to just put things down for a bit? And it's something that I definitely have, I've kind of thinking, right, this got to be different in 2026. And I think those are the things that we should be doing moving into the new year, is like, what are the behaviors that have benefited us, that we've learned over these last 12 months, that we want to carry forward, and what maybe hasn't been as helpful. So sort of like, I must eat chocolate, or I mustn't eat chocolate, I must do veganuary, or I must do dry January, or whatever it is that people are going to put themselves under, actually looking at what's benefited me, what's made me most happy these last, has it been when I have been out for a social run? Well, what's that telling me? That's actually telling me that the social connection bit is more important than maybe going off and doing a hard run on my own, for example. Or, what else have I benefited from? Oh, I've noticed that actually when I get 8 hours sleep a night, I feel better. Or if I journal in the morning, or actually if I wake up and do a bit of yoga rather than going to the gym, I feel a bit calmer. Like I think it's understanding what that I think that's a really good practice at this time of year to actually, and it's not too late to do it at all, but like just to kind of look at what has worked for me and what has created or generated more stress within me. And as you said, Faye, of course we know that, the sort of the gut brain axis is very tightly linked and it's a double, it's biodirectional. So we know that if we are stressed, then it's going to have a negative effect on our gut biome. And of course, that then has its own implications for our immunity and our mental health. But equally, if we equally if we start with the gut, maybe when we've had antibiotics, or if we've had a period of time where we've overtrained and we know that causes dysbiosis, that in itself then has this negative impact on our mental health. And it's these things that people don't always realize. And I think, again, we touched on it in our last conversation, but humans are so incredible. Like we are this like amazing feat of chemical engineering. And all these processes are working in conjunction with each other. And if we tip one, we could tip several others, but we don't think about that. So, going back to, I go back to this kind of weight loss jab sort of fixation at the moment. And okay, maybe on one hand, it ticks this box that, oh, okay, we can all be a lower BMI, we can all reduce our risk of maybe, you know, the kind of the diseases that are associated with obesity. However, have you ever stopped to think about what else could be going on by doing that to yourself? Like the fact we know it does cause severe dysbiosis in our gut. It also, there's quite a lot of concerns about the fact that it reduces the amount of energy you can actually physically consume. So actually, you're putting yourself consciously into potentially low energy availability, which is then we know is going to have this negative effect on your hormones and your bone health. There's this constant concern at the moment about the effect it's having on our pancreas. Like, so it's all very well when we fixate on this one outcome. But I always think if you're working with humans, you can't just focus on an outcome. You have to think about the whole process. And actually, if you're fixating on this one outcome, what does that mean for everything else?
Mm.
And it's like I see it in athletes all the time. Like they'll fixate on achieving a weight goal or a body composition goal, but at the detriment of their bone health. Okay, so maybe they get one great outcome, one great performance because they've got this body composition. And then what happens? They get stress fracture after stress fracture after stress fracture. You have to think about yourself as this whole being, not just this one outcome. And I guess that's one of the reasons I don't like the new year, new me, because you don't need to be new. You're all good. Everybody has got what they need within them. It's just maybe sometimes looking out of a different window and seeing
Yeah.
it from a different perspective.
Yeah, you literally read my mind there because I was gonna ask about, I guess, with athletes and the performance, and we tend to, I guess, maybe see because it is January and people are trying to put down some goals for themselves and they want to hit this time or they want to run this 5K or achieve this high rocks. And I've noticed like on a few people's Instagram posts, people saying they want to get to like a certain weight and they need to drop this amount to be able to run this fast. But I was gonna ask about, yeah, like you say, the issues that then causes. It may well work for that one performance and that one race, but over a whole season or a whole year, how that can affect, and if that's also kind of, I guess, similar to the whole yo-yo dieting and I'm gonna track everything and eat really well for this 8 weeks, do my race, peak, and then I'm gonna kind of let myself go and do whatever I want for a little bit and then go again, and then the cycle kind of repeats and what effect that has.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like, you know, what we're talking about here is it is low energy availability in the sense of so I want to think about how to answer this one. I guess what I'm trying to say is that what I'm not saying is that you should never have goals, right? I think it's okay to have a goal. It's okay to have an aspiration. But one of the things we used to talk about when we were preparing athletes for big major competitions is that it's useful to have a plan, but always know that that plan might need to be ripped up and started again. And I guess that's the kind of mentality I I want people to try and take on in the, okay, have a direction you might be going in, but be prepared that you might have to change that direction, or you might have to, kind of be a little bit more flexible with where you're going, because this unfortunately this notion of being lighter to be faster, or be lighter to perform better, it doesn't appear to be going anywhere, even though there's lots of us saying it's not really the answer. But I guess unfortunately, we had it earlier when we had it last year in the Tour de France Femme, when the kind of all the information, all the kind of no, noise came out about what Pauline and what she did, and it's a tricky one, right? But I guess again, it kind of goes back to genetics a little bit. And I think, not that I'm a geneticist at all, but I just keep seeing it. And I've read a lot of metabolic um, literature recently, just to kind of understand more and more like how we work as humans. And so much is tied into our genetics. So for example, we know, and this is like, if we look at eating disorders, for an example, we know that even within eating disorders, even within like particularly restrictive eating disorders like anorexia, we know that a lot of those individuals, there'll be a very small percentage, even of those individuals, that have these very, very strong hunter-gatherer genes, which means that they can push themselves a lot further than other people before their bodies break down. Now, I'm not saying that's a positive. I'm just saying that that's why some people end up at a much lower BMI before their bodies completely break down and they are in a devastating place and they need support. Whereas other people can still be in that same place but a much higher BMI. That doesn't mean that one person is, you know, more uh, one person is better at being anorexic than the other. It doesn't mean that at all. It just goes back to genetics, that we know that genetics have so much influence in how we are and what our bodies can do. It's the same with this, what they're finding with this weight loss, the weight loss jabs, and this is looking at people who are obese and then who actually need to be on there. What they're finding with the metabolic studies is that for some people, they will lose a certain amount of weight, and when they come off the weight loss jabs, they won't put on as much back. Whereas for other people, they will. And there seems to be a genetic reason for that. And again, like I said earlier, yes, you can influence to a certain degree with lifestyle, but I think it's just cutting to a point of acceptance that some of us are going to naturally be in a bigger body, and some of us are going to naturally be in a smaller body. And that's it. That's just how it is. But I think one of my worries about this kind of this solution now with the weight loss jabs is that people don't have to do the work to accept who they are, because in their minds there's a solution that they can do. I don't think it's a particularly healthy solution for most people, but there's a solution. And I think that worries me quite a lot. So going back to kind of what you were asking, Em, about athletes, there will be some, like if we think about athletes, but like high level athletes, high performing athletes, they are outliers. That is why they are athletes. That is why they get the gold medals. They are not you and I, right? They are outliers. And so that means they are physiologically gifted. So that might mean that they naturally sit at a lower body fat percentage, which gives them that advantage. That might mean that they have more fast twitch muscle fibers that gives them that advantage. Like that they are physiological outliers, and the rest of us cannot look at them and go, well, I want to be like that, because it's just not reality. Okay. And someone like Pauline, now I don't know her per se, but again, I spoke about this quite openly during Tour de France Femme. Some people will be able to reduce their body fat percentage, their body weight to a point where it doesn't affect them cognitively, and then go back to a healthier place because they just keep it there for a very short period of time. Other people who will end up having to who do that will be cognitively affected negatively, and they'll end up in a disordered place. And that's what you're always trying to, you've got to kind of always be mindful of when you're working with athletes. So when you're working with individuals, I mean, I can't sit here and say to you that sport doesn't dictate a particular body composition, because it does. And I can't sit here and say to you that I'm not asked to 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 kind of sometimes help athletes achieve a certain physique. However, I'm much more cautious than most people. And because I have this understanding of the kind of how it can affect someone psychologically, I'm much more mindful about my approach, and also about who I'm getting to really know who I'm working with, to see if it's something and how far you can push them, if that's what we need, and for how long as well. So I think like it's a very complicated situation, and I worry about the number of people that just look at these athletes and think, well, they dropped X and they then won. So that's what we should all be doing. And it's not as simple as that, because these athletes are being really, really rigorously monitored most of the time, you know.
Mm.
And depending on the sport, it'll be a healthy monitoring, and in some other sports it won't be. But it's that's the case. And so the problem is that if you are somebody that reduces your weight, reduces your body fat percentage to get to a place where you believe you can perform better, and like you say, you end up getting a really good outcome and performance of that. The problem is that you then don't have a team around you that's saying, okay, well, that was a one-off. It's not sustainable to stay here. You need to now revert back to where normal is. And then potentially, if you need to go back down that way again, then you do that. But again, this is not their job. And so again, the question is, why would you do that to yourself? So I think one of my worry, my big concerns is that with the access to social media, and we can see what athletes do, we hear what they do because they're sharing and everything else. It In some ways, what it's done is it's opened up this kind of belief that, well, if they can do it, then that's what I should be doing too. Whereas in the past, when we didn't have social media, we knew athletes did their thing, but we didn't really know what they were doing. But we were also just like we were recreational, and we just got on with it, and it was enough to go and just do our run, or maybe notice, like, see how fast you can get. When you first start running, of course there's improvements, right? Like I remember my first half marathon, I thought, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. I wonder if I could go any quicker. And then you try again a few months later and you're like, okay, I knocked off a minute. Great. Like that's normal. But you again get to a point. I know with with both my marathon, half marathon time and my marathon time, I got to a point where I was like, okay, I can't get any quicker than this now. This is as fast as I get. And I was okay with that. I was okay to go, okay, well, that's it. I back away and I go and try something else. But that's not the mentality that a lot of people have anymore. It's always like, what else can I do to go that bit further to get that outcome? And I guess the question is, why do you need that outcome?
Mm.
What is that? What is it that you can't attain within yourself that you need that outcome to kind of help you feel better?
Yeah. I think it's really interesting. And we were talking about the influence that people have, especially with social media right now. And just like the podcast, we just put in one out with a girl called Sophia Parvitzi-Wayne, and she said that one of her friends said to her the other day, could you still do high rocks if you couldn't post about it on Instagram? And the the question that you've just asked, is in why do you want to go a bit further? Like, what is your purpose? What is the reason behind it? Is it the process? Is it because you want to chase a bigger goal, or is it because you feel like you need to put it up on social media to be like, now I've done this? Or like, if you couldn't post it on social media, would people still go and do it? Or is it the whole process of the fact everyone's doing these big challenges or going a little bit further and you don't want to be left behind, or you want to become an influencer, or I don't know. It's an interesting question where I think it's, yeah, if people that really stopped and thought, would they be doing it for themselves? And if the camera wasn't on and they couldn't post it afterwards, would they still do that challenge or that race, or
Yeah, I
would they
think there's
change?
such like comparison now. Like that's like the huge thing, whether it's on the challenges you do, the times you get, the way your body looks, like what size of something you're wearing. Like I think there's just such an ease to like compare yourself to anyone and everyone, whether that is someone like that's an elite athlete who's got all day to train and focus on it, or an influencer or whoever it is. You can just compare yourself to like the whole world, it feels like.
Yeah, and I guess like it's it's a worry, isn't it? Because the I think it's hard enough being human, right? I think it's hard enough. You just think about the stages of life you go through, uh, probably the best time is when you're a kid and you're not really having to worry about things that, your family and your parents give you that security to a certain degree. And, well, in a lot of cases, not in all cases, as we know. But I think then I was thinking about this, I guess, again, having this milestone birthday. And it's a funny one actually, because I went, as you guys know, I went to Paris for my birthday. And the first time I went to Paris, I was 24. And this is the fourth time I've been to Paris, and I was 50. And I was talking to my husband about like, oh my God, like because we went to the Montmartre, which I hadn't been since I was 24. And I was like, I don't remember any of this. And he said to me, he goes, Really, it was 26 years ago. And I was like, yeah, there is that. But it was interesting that, in some ways I remember that trip so clearly, but obviously it was a very long time ago. And but I do remember being like my daughter's age. My eldest daughter is about to turn 23, and I remember, you know, I remember I remember being her age and thinking I was so grown up and I had life sussed. And now I think about where I'm at, and I'm like, I think I'm less self-assured now than I was then, even though I've got more experience. And so I think like I said, being human is so complicated. You're constantly learning about yourself, you're constantly evolving. And my worry about the social media aspect is that I was really lucky. I didn't grow up in it,
Mm.
so I I think I really not sure I'd actually be here. I say that in all honesty, if I had grown up in it, because my self-worth was so low as a teenager and a young woman. I had such a difficult time. I had such a low sense of worth that I think if I had grown up with Instagram
Mm.
or any social media, I think my mental health would have been even worse than it was. And I think I would
Um, Beanie, I think we just totally lost the
might
connection.
not have made it.
Sorry, Beanie, I think we just lost you. You just a
Me
little bit
now?
there. Yeah, sorry, we've got you now. You were just saying that if you grew up
Okay, cool.
with Instagram
Yeah,
and something about social
yeah,
connection, I think it just started to cut out.
yeah. So I think if I had grown up with social media, I think my mental health was already quite poor as a
Mm.
teenager and a young woman. I'm not sure I would have made it, if I'm honest. And I think that's what I I feel so strongly about with social media. And it's why I think I said this to you last time, like when I'm posting, I agonize about the wording that I use, or I agonize about what to share because I'm conscious that I want to be supportive and encouraging and educational, but I don't want to upset anyone or cause them to feel even less validated than they already feel, if that makes sense. And it's very difficult to achieve. Like, you know, I don't think people often, I don't think people stop and think about how long it takes me, but I really do agonize over what I post and the copy that I write. And there are mornings like sometimes I've written the copy and I've sent it to Eloise, who manages my actual account, but I write all the copy for it. And then in the morning, like at 6 in the morning, I'll message her going, "Don't post it. I've thought about it all night and I don't," like that's the impact it has on me because I worry so much about um how it's going to land. But I'm one person in however many. I don't think many people stop and think about it. I think most people, as you've both said, are trying to progress themselves. They're trying to, like it's almost like everybody is competing with those nine squares with who's got the best life, who's achieving the most, who's got the best brand, you know, and that I just think that's exhausting. And if you haven't, like for me, like I said, I've got the ability, I've had like years and years of therapy, I work in this field, I understand now how a lot of psychology and the brain works, and I have the capacity to look at something and go, that is not relevant to me, and I am not going to get sucked into that. But actually, very few people do have that, particularly younger people. And again, we're hearing now that we always used to know that your frontal cortex doesn't develop until you're 25. And now they're saying actually your frontal cortex probably doesn't fully develop until you're in your 30s. So if you're being influenced by all this different information and you haven't got the ability to filter and work out what is actually factual and what is just someone trying to sell you something and trying to make themselves money. I can only appreciate how exhausting it is, and in the last couple of years I've thought several times, I think I don't want to be part of this anymore. I don't want to be part of this because I I just I don't think it's a very healthy place for people. However, I'm also conscious that the work that I do and the words I put out do tend to help a lot of people. And so then I feel like, oh, I've got to stay here. But it's not always good for me either. So, like the comparison trap is there, as you said, Emma, and it's for everyone, but it's sometimes you can feel a little bit more confident in your own place and knowledge and think, I do not need to do that. And sometimes you're not. But that's where I know that I can kind of manage myself better. And I've got lots of things I do to help myself manage myself better on social media. Like, for example, I have it switched off from 7 p.m. till 8 a.m. every day because I just don't want to get involved. So sometimes when people are like, why hasn't she answered? It's, well, that's the reason why I have not answered, because it's yeah, it's switched off. That's why. And there are days when I say to Eloise, I'm not looking on it at all. If there's anything that's people, if there are any questions, then let me know and I will go on and I will just respond to the questions. Like I'm very like I want to be attentive to my followers, but I don't want to be influenced by it. If I'm having a bad day, I know that that's when I'm going to be most vulnerable and I'm going to be more likely um to become impacted by it. So I take a step back. But again, I have that, I've got that kind of capability to know that. And I don't, and young people don't. So that's what worries me about Instagram. And I think it's just realizing that it's not real life. It's a virtual reality because nobody's life can be that, you know?
Well, everyone just puts up their highlights, don't they? And it can be all consuming. And I think I don't know, like Emma, you've done a lot this year with our Instagram, and I've probably taken more of a step back. But sometimes you've been like, I just had to step away, and I'm like, oh, I'll take over for a bit because I don't think it's good for anyone to be in that. Because whether you think you compare yourself or not, everyone compares themselves, and especially when people are injured or ill, or
Mhm.
people are maxed out with work and they can't. I'm talking from like I guess a competitive point of view, and they see other people achieving maybe a goal that they set themselves and they're not doing it. It all impacts, yeah, negatively, I guess, as much as it can be inspirational and maybe make people think they can achieve more than they thought they ever could. There's that side of it as well. But yeah, I think it can just get all consuming sometimes, and having boundaries, like you just said, is super important, especially if you're younger, because I would have hated to have grown up with social media at school. I can't even imagine what that's like.
Yeah. Let me ask you two something. Do you think that we should have lessons in schools on how to navigate social media?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's part of
100%.
life now, whether you like it or not. I think if you run a business, if you're not on social media, you're going to get left behind. It's almost that if you can't beat them, join them type thing. But if you're at school and you don't really know how to navigate it, and you don't understand that maybe it's just a highlight reel of people's lives, and it isn't the ups and downs. No one's going to share the fact they've sat at a laptop for 8 hours that day, or they had to go into work and I don't know,
And they actually
do a
took them
stock
like
take.
4 hours to do that reel.
Yeah,
Yeah,
or they've spun
yeah,
You're
round
not
circles
ready.
in their room like Emma. Yeah, I
I'm
think
like,
it is.
wow, this has taken me all day. How is this possible? But I do think, yeah, it's interesting. And then I think, like, as a female with hormones as well, I feel like at different stages, like, I can, like, look at stuff so differently on social
Mhm.
media just because I'm feeling like, oh God, I feel crap, or I'm at that time of the month, or I've not hit those paces, or like your self-worth's a bit lower, and it's that time that you then see something else that you then compare yourself, that it's like a vicious cycle. But say 2 weeks later I look and I would be like, oh, that's really cool, like that's inspired me. And it's just, yeah, I guess everything linking together, and but being able to recognize it, I think that's like what you're saying, being able to manage it and being able to recognize that that is what's happening.
I think having self-awareness is what we should be helping people um to learn. Like we're human. We are going to react. The thing about being a human is that we're made up of lots of different parts, right? Like we will have an adventurous part, and we'll have a critical part, and we'll have a judgmental part, and we'll have a and these parts they'll be within us from when we were younger. And depending on our experiences as a young person, some parts will be more dominant than other parts, right? And they get activated. And I suppose one of the things I've learned is when I notice maybe a particular post or a particular reel or a particular person has generated, and it's kind of evoked an activation within me. What I've started to learn to do is kind of recognize that, oh, okay, this is causing something to happen inside me. I can't always identify what it is, but something is not okay here. I'm not okay here, you know? And I think then that's the moment for me to kind of take a step back and press pause and kind of go, okay, so what is it that I'm believing now? And majority of the time, what has normally happened is that I've seen something, and I think what normally happens is it activates my critical part, and my critical part starts telling me that, well, I'm not doing enough, or I'm not good enough, but even just getting to that point of recognizing that that's what's happening, I'm able to then go, okay, but that's just my critical part trying to converse with me, rather than act on it. I can then just kind of have this conversation with this critical part of me. And I think that's something that if we could learn to teach kids about the fact that, there will be lots of different situations and scenarios are going to create different parts of you to get activated. And that doesn't mean you need to respond to that. It just means you need to be open to the conversation that it needs to be had. And I find that's one way to navigate social media, a little bit better. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it definitely helps me in that moment to kind of recognize that, okay, I need to take a step back here. And I think also things can be useful is to know, something again often do with clients, particularly clients who do struggle with being able to see themselves for who they are, is ask them to ask three friends just to write a short paragraph about what it is about them that draws them to them, like what it is that they see. And I often tell them to take pictures of those and have them on their phone. Or if you've had a really nice text from someone who, who's kind of valued you, or whatever it might be. And and then in those moments where you have got self-doubt, where the kind of you're struggling to be able to see that you are enough, or that you're feeling like maybe you should be doing more, you have this evidence, this very black and white evidence that actually, what, it doesn't matter that that person's doing that, because actually this is what I'm loved for. I'm loved because I'm kind, or because I make them laugh, or because I'm generous with my time, or whatever it might be. And it goes back to where we started, in the sense of you start working out what really matters to you, you know?
Mm.
So I think that it's a really, really important exercise to kind of stop and think, what matters to you? What do you really want to be remembered for? Do you want to be remembered for being kind, or do you want to be remembered for being thin? Right?
Yeah.
Like,
It's that, but have you seen that quote? I can't even remember where I saw it, but like someone said, at your funeral, no one's going to turn around and say, "Oh, you had a great pair of shoes and an awesome sofa." Everyone's going to remember like how you made them feel.
yeah.
So same way as in like what you look like, or with it, like everyone just remembers how you made them feel. If you made them laugh, if you were kind, if you were there when they needed them, if you were, yeah, friendly, and that's more important than what's whether you've got a size 8 or a size 16 or a size 20 or a size 0 or whatever t-shirt on, which is
And
the
also,
labels inside, so no one can see it
that,
anyway.
and you don't change as a person.
No.
Right? Like, if you're a kind person who is useful, you can listen. Like, I always think that about myself. And like, I've had times when I've really struggled with the, especially in the current climate, where it's actually very hard to be a person of color. And I've sometimes really struggled with the fact that, you know, I give so much of my um, energy and time to make others feel valued and feel heard, and that's because I want to. This is the job I've chosen to do, because it is who I am as a person. And sometimes I think, if I wasn't a person of color, it wouldn't change who I am. I'm still the same person,
Mm.
right? And it's the same with what you wear, or how you look. I mean, no one is going to. I don't know. Like, it's an interesting one. When I first qualified as a dietitian, I remember um feeling this, and this was like a long time ago, but I remember feeling this massive pressure, in the sense of, oh, well, I can't be too thin, and I can't be overweight, because ultimately people won't come and want advice from me if I'm either of those two things. And then as time rolled on, I was like, it doesn't matter, because it again, we go back to some of the things we've already talked about today. What you look like is not relevant to whether you're healthy or not, in the most part. As in, you know, and I'm careful about how I say this, because I know people often jump down my throat when I say this, but there are going to be people who are overweight and obese, and they are this way because of their behaviors. And I get that. There are also people who are overweight and obese because of their genetics and their metabolism, and and potentially there's lifestyle factors in there too. But if you have somebody who starts at that place, and they start changing their behaviors, so they start to participate in being more active, and we're not talking about running 100K, we're talking about, just getting up and maybe starting off with a few squats off the sofa, and you build up. You start with 5, then you do 10, then you do 20, and then maybe you start to feel a bit more mobile. So you start doing some step ups on the steps, whatever it might be. We're just talking about a little change, but you start to do that once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week. That's all we're talking about. If you start to change and you participate in behaviors that we know are healthy for you. So, for example, when you're eating, you're not choosing food based on calories because it's a pointless exercise. You're choosing food based on nutrient value. So that means you might choose an avocado over a digestive biscuit, right? Because an avocado might be higher in calories, but actually it gives you more nutrition. So you if you're actually participating in all those healthy behaviors that we know are going to lead to better metrics in terms of your cardiovascular health, your glycemic health, your joint health, even if you're overweight, even if you're obese, you're still healthy. And I
Mm.
think I I want this to be the change in 2026, in that people are not judged on their health based on what they look like, but they're judged on their health based on what their metrics say. Because honestly, I have people in my clinic who are significantly underweight and I would say are less healthy than some of those people that are overweight and participating in all in all the behaviors that are necessary. And so, if you're sat there listening to this and you're thinking, oh, I should go out for my run, or I should, oh, I've only done 20 minutes of walking today and I ate a tiramisu last night or whatever it might be, just don't. Like, if you enjoyed the tiramisu and it made you feel good and it was with friends, whether you went for a 20-minute walk today or not, it's not going to change you as a person. It's thinking about that bigger picture. It's thinking about, I'm like, I'm not saying eat tiramisu every day, but I'm just saying that people have this real like, oh, if I eat X, Y is going to happen. Well, it's not overnight.
Mm.
There's time, there's space, there's opportunity. Every day there's opportunity for you to do something a little bit different. And I say this to my friends and to my kids and also to a lot of my clients. The one thing we do have control over is our intention. So instead of trying to control your body, have control over your intention. If the intention is to be a little bit kinder to yourself today, or to be maybe to participate in one of those healthy health behaviors because that's what is needed. And even if you don't achieve it, it doesn't matter because the intention was there and you have given it that intention. Like it's my intention every day to be calm and to be kind. Now, I don't achieve being calm every day. I try, but I do not. I do generally try and I think I'm generally quite a kind person. So generally that intention is there. But my husband might disagree from time to time. I don't know. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that that's what we can do. We can
Mm.
have the intention, and that's what's important. So whether you are in a really bad place right now and it feels like recovery feels like a very, very far off distance, that's okay. Break it down into the intention of taking one step forward. Or you're somebody who, is maybe aware that your body composition is having a negative effect on your health, and you legitimately do need to make changes to your behaviors to be healthy. Again, just break it down into one step, one intention. And I
Mm.
think in that way, that's a much healthier way of kind of starting the new year, is like we said, reflecting back on what has worked and what hasn't worked and thinking about, what you can do within your capacity that's not going to break you or feel punishing. Because that's the thing, right? As soon as something feels punishing, it's not fun.
Got negative connotations as well, just even from the start, hasn't it?
Yeah,
You're never gonna have a positive change from something that feels so negative and so restrictive.
yeah.
At the same time, when we're talking about like making the positive changes or smaller changes, how about right now? I mean, I know my Instagram gets like clogged up with it with co so-called coaches, nutrition coaches, maybe just people that have a lot of influence over other people on Instagram, and people want to either look like them or perform like them. Like quick fixes. I mean, we've talked about weight loss
Mm.
injections and how that, like, most of the time doesn't always work. And the fact that everyone wants a quick fix, but really there is no quick fix. So if you're seeing something on Instagram, on a website, or even on TV, and we've got the old school like Slimming World and Weight Watchers and all that. And if these were so effective, they probably never exist, because everyone would go on them once and they'd never come back to them. But everyone goes, "Oh, I'm back on Weight Watchers again." Like, there's no quick fix as far as I'm aware. I don't know. I mean, you're the expert. Is there a quick fix that everyone can go jump on and
No, there isn't. There is no quick fix there. And if something feels too good to be true, it's too good to be true. And as
usually
you
is?
just said, Faye, like the whole premise of diet culture comes from basically profiting somebody else. That's
Yeah.
why it's not as simple as calories in versus calories out. I think
Because
the one
everything is
thing,
based on, yeah,
yeah,
everyone says that, like, "I'll just cut your calories down and you'll lose
yeah.
weight," and but it never sticks, does it? So everyone comes back to it again. Or
Because the problem is that we are not a simple computer. We are not a simple kind of, mechanical. Yeah, we're not a robot that you can program that way. Like we need a certain amount of energy, and if we cut our calories too far, then we also start to, you know, adapt to that, which means that when you then try and go back to eating normally again or whatever you want to do, then actually your body it struggles to kind of go back to where it has been before. Again, I go back to genetically, your body will know where it naturally wants to be. So it's the best thing you can do if you are somebody, like I said, who legitimately does feel the need that they want to lose weight. The best thing you can do is think about the kind of sustainable small changes that you can make that are not they're not punishing, and they're things that are just part of your lifestyle. Like, we used to say in when I was a dietitian working in the NHS, in like early jobs where you did work a lot with people who were sent to you by their GPs to lose weight. Um, we'd say things like, okay, well, let's just start with not putting sugar in your tea,
mm,
or let's just start with changing your can of Coke for a Diet Coke. Like, there would be small, little tiny steps that are actually achievable. And even those may take several months before they can fully do it. People might go, oh, well, I have two sugars in my tea, so that's quite a lot. Okay, well then start with one or half, or like it's these small sustainable changes that are going to last, and then they're going to keep you, they kind of they keep building on your health in that
mm,
way. It's not actually fast fix, quick approaches are probably going to be more detrimental to your health in the long run anyway,
mm,
because they're never helpful. So yeah, I know it's a I think one thing I'm very mindful of is I'm saying all this stuff, but I do understand if somebody is sat there right now listening and they're feeling really, really uncomfortable in who they are,
yeah,
and they're really at real dis-ease within themselves. I know how that feels, and how all you really want to do is unzip yourself and walk out of that body. And that feeling that you've got is legitimate, and that feeling is valid, but that feeling is not about what you look like. That's what I want to say to people. That feeling is about how you perceive and relate to yourself. And it's probably more deep rooted in actually experiences and the way in which you know, the way in which the things you believe about yourself. So,
mm,
like, again, I go back to being a person of color, and I remember being at school and just not feeling like I fitted in. And it
mm,
wasn't about the fact that, I grew up on a council estate and everybody else at school didn't. It wasn't about the fact that I felt like a physically different shape to everybody else. Absolute Now I can see it was about the fact that I had brown skin and nobody else did.
mm,
And that discomfort I felt, I projected onto, oh, but if I was thinner, if I was taller, if I had, more stylish hair. If my dad drive that car, that's what I did all the
Mm.
time. And it never ever made me feel happy. When my dad did change the car, made no difference. Ultimately, what made the difference was me accepting that this is who I am, and this is who I am. And actually, the people that accept me as I am are the people that I'll keep in my lives, and the people that don't accept me as I am, they're not really worth being in my life. And so I think that's what I'd like to kind of just say to anybody who is sat there, because I know what it feels like when you totally believe that changing your physique is going to make you feel better. It's going to make you feel more confident. It's going to make you feel like you fit in. It's not about your body. This is about something a lot deeper. And it's kind of understanding that it's probably more about how you, well, it's about whether you accept yourself, right?
Mm.
And that's a lot of work to do, but it's actually even acknowledging that is the first step to change.
Yeah. So, but and then I also think like for other people outside of that and anybody that's listening that maybe does run a course that looks at like maybe making money or making something out of people's vulnerable state or people that don't feel 100% happy with where they are. I think that's the worst thing is for me seeing it on social media or on websites where people are targeting people when they don't feel like 100% happy. It People see it as a quick fix to get money from people. So if yeah, I think that's the problem, not so much people taking the chance on all these different courses or all these different coaches to try and change who they are. It's almost the people that recognize they can make money from it that is the
Yeah,
scary thing, especially in January, because you start to see it a lot more when
yeah,
people feel like they can put these random courses out, and it's just like people being aware that, like you said, to look maybe a bit deeper instead of going with these random people you've never heard of because they promise you that you can do this in 30 days or they can change your life. And it's yeah, I think that's the scary part for me.
totally. And I want to say as well that, the human body has a very strong survival instinct.
Mm.
So even if you do drop your weight down or your body comp down, if it's too low, then the body will, it will fight back, in some way or another, whether that's in a kind of, like we talked about earlier, whether that's, sort of, down regulating your sex reproductive hormones and sex hormones so that you don't have a menstrual cycle, or you stop producing testosterone, and then that has a negative effect on your fertility but also your bone health, or whether that is that actually when food becomes available you end up eating it to excess, like, the body will have a way of fighting back. I before Christmas I did a keynote speech to the British Psychological Society, and it was in the division of sports psychology and exercise. And one of the slides I showed was that when you look at, and I did males and females, but when you I focus more on the females, but when you look at the normal acceptable body fat percentage values for females, it's between 20% and up to 30% depending on age. Because obviously, as you age, you actually do have a little bit more body fat because that's just completely normal. And when you look at what is expected of athletes, female athletes, they're just they were it all sat under even the lowest possible that was acceptable for normal. And the normal, the lowest possible for normal is the lowest possible. That's the lowest, generally the lowest point at which your body can be fertile.
Mm.
So one of the questions I posed to the audience was, when we know this, who has created these guidelines, even for female athletes? Because the reality is we are 100%, if we're encouraging female athletes to sit in this area, we are 100% having a negative effect on their health.
Mm.
So, you know, and I don't really even know where those numbers have come from, right? That's the thing that's interesting. So I think like before like you were saying, Faye, looking at all these people that are putting out courses and whatever, have a look at them. Do they really look healthy to you? Do they really look like, is that the lifestyle you truly, truly want? I definitely do not want to be drinking green juices for the rest of my life because that is not what I want to be doing. Like, think about how sustainable is this for me?
Mm. Yeah,
You know,
100%. I
they're
think
the
that's
things you need.
amazing.
And you said, and the biggest question, as you've said, is who's going to profit from this?
Yeah, I do think that. I do think it's so interesting. You're like, why can you do something different? Why is this individual got the magic solution, the quick fix, when nobody else? I don't. It's
Yeah.
just if it's too good to be true, it usually is too good to be true, isn't it? It's
Mm,
yeah.
No,
definitely.
absolutely. I mean, this has been fascinating. I feel like we've covered a lot and a lot of different angles. But as we had the closing question on the last episode, which wasn't too long ago, I'm gonna change it up slightly and ask anything that you would kind of want to leave with the listeners if they are thinking about how they want to approach 2026, whether that's from any perspective. It's up to you. You can go in any angle, but maybe if they're just looking at 2026 as a year, as an opportunity of a year, like what you would say to them.
I would say don't always treat opportunity as a negative, right? Like there's a tendency for people to think, oh, if I do that, but what if it goes wrong? Or what if it doesn't work out for me? Because we tend to kind of think in that kind of negative.
That's what I do.
Yeah,
But
literally.
Faye's smiling because she's like, that is exactly what I do.
I've always faced opportunity head on and kind of seen, well, there's a 50-50 chance it could
Mm,
actually be really, really positive as well. And if it doesn't work out, I know that I have the capacity and the resources within me to be okay with that. And you'll learn something from it anyway, right?
Mm.
'Cause I used to describe it to some clients as this kind of, I always imagined, and it's because it's happened to me. And the first time I went to Nepal, um, I was you kind of the race I did there, you the first couple of days you're kind of following this river path. And what I kept noticing was every time we came to like a bit of a twist in the river, you would turn and you would just see some other incredible, like just incredible scenery, this kind of scenic, either like an ice-capped mountain or just this amazing valley or something. It would just be incredible. And it really changed my outlook because I thought, well, if you kind of think of life in this way, that's what life is, right? It's a journey and there are going to be twists and turns, and sometimes you'll turn the corner and it might be an eyesore, and sometimes you'll turn the corner and it might be incredible, but actually either one, you're going to learn something from it and you're going to take something from it. And I guess that's what I'd say to people is in 2026 is don't always see opportunity as something you have to be fearful of. Maybe go for it.
Yeah, I love that. I always
yeah,
think that. I always think what's the worst that can happen, and not knowing if you didn't do it, you'd never know, and you'd always wonder. Whereas surely it's better to know if it didn't work, it didn't work.
Yeah,
Move on. So yeah,
exactly.
that's so
well,
cool.
yeah, thank you so much. If anyone didn't listen to the previous episode, do you mind just giving another little rundown of how they can find you, follow you, reach out if they wanted a bit more help with anything, and where to get some more information?
Sure. So I have a website which is just very simple, reneemcgregor.com. I have an Instagram account which is r_McGregor. And then I've actually since we spoke, I've also now got Substack, which is the Fuel Line. And that appears to be very popular. So I try and write something every couple of weeks, and it's generally just what is going through my head. So hopefully, yeah, people want to learn a bit more about me and also just a little bit more about what I do, then that's also a good resource for a lot of people.
Yeah, I've only just recently found out about Substack. Is it like a newsletter, or is it like a does it go into your email or something
Yeah,
like
so with
yeah.
Substack, the reason I started Substack was because I was becoming quite frustrated, as I've said, with Instagram in terms of it's really impossible to be nuanced on Instagram because of the,
Mm,
the limited amount of captions you can use. And I I wanted to write a bit more freely, and obviously I have books and things, but sometimes I'm thinking I want to be a little bit reactive, and sometimes I want to give a little bit more about
yeah.
myself. And so Substack is a bit like a blog, I guess.
Yeah.
But again, the topics, I mean, I covered weight loss jabs as my first one, and then like my last one, which I did so the week before Christmas and New Year, was very much about being mindful and kind of the things I was thinking about at that time. But then I've also written about Reds, and I've written about you know, uh, some of the narratives I see in the world of nutrition. So yeah, it kind of depends on what I'm feeling, but it feels good because it's a long form of writing, and it means that I can be a little bit more nuanced as well, which I hopefully is more helpful for people.
Oh,
Yeah, amazing.
amazing. Yeah,
That's really
that's a
cool.
great addition. Well, thank you so much for your time again. We've loved this, and I think, yeah, it's going to be a great episode for people to listen to, especially at the start of the year. And if you haven't listened to our previous episode, you can find that as well on the podcast with Renee, where we chat even more. So yeah, it's been great. So thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
No,
Um,
thank you so much again for having me. And yeah, have a great 2026.
yes, you too.